اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. يا أيها العزيز مسنا وأحلنا الضر وجعنا ببزاعة مزجاة فأوف لنا الكيل فتصدق علينا إن الله يجزي المتصدقين. يا رب الحسين بحق الحسين اشف صدر الحسين بظهور الحجة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله. السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله. السلام عليك يا خيرة الله وابن خيرته. السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين وابن سيد الوسيين. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة سيدة النساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والوتر الموتور. السلام عليك وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليكم مني جميعا سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار. يا أبا عبد الله. يا أبا عبد الله. لقد عظمت الرزية وجلت وعظمت المصيبة بك علينا وعلى جميع أهل الإسلام. وجلت وعظمت مصيبتك في السماوات على جميع أهل السماوات. فلعن الله أمة أسست أساس الظلم والجور عليكم أهل البيت. ولعن الله أمة دفعتكم عن مقامكم وأزالتكم عن مراتبكم التي رتبكم الله فيها. ولعن الله أمة قتلتكم ولعن الله الممهدين لهم بالتمكين من قتالكم. برئت إلى الله وإليكم منهم ومن أشيائهم وأتباعهم وأوليائهم. يا أبا عبد الله إني سلم لمن سالمكم وحرب لمن حاربكم إلى يوم القيامة. ولعن الله آل زياد وآل مروان. ولعن الله بني أمية قاطبة. ولعن الله ابن مرجان. ولعن الله عمر بن سعد. ولعن الله شمرا. ولعن الله أمة أسرجت وألجمت وتنقبت لقتالك بأبي أنت وأمي لقد عظم مصابي بك، فأسأل الله الذي أكرم مقامك وأكرمني بك أن يرزقني طلب ثارك مع إمام منصور من أهل بيت محمد صلى الله عليه وآله. اللهم اجعلني عندك وجيحا بالحسين عليه السلام في الدنيا والآخرة يا أبا عبد الله، يا أبا عبد الله. فأسأل الله الذي أكرم مقامك وأكرمني بك أن يرزقني طلب ثارك مع إمام منصور من أهل بيت محمد صلى الله عليه وآله. اللهم اجعلني عندك وجيحا بالحسين عليه السلام في الدنيا والآخرة يا أبا عبد الله. إني أتقرب إلى الله وإلى رسوله وإلى أمير المؤمنين وإلى فاطمة وإلى الحسن وإليك بموالاتك وبالبراعة ممن قاتلك ونسب لك الحرب، وبالبراعة ممن أسس أساس الظلم والجور عليكم، وأبرأ إلى الله وإلى رسوله ممن أسس أساس ذلك وبنى عليه بنيانا وجرى في ظلمه وجوره عليكم وعلى أشيائكم. برئت إلى الله وإليكم منهم، وأتقرب إلى الله ثم إليكم بموالاتكم وموالاة وليكم، وبالبراءة من أعدائكم والناسبين لكم الحرب، وبالبراءة من أشيائهم وأتباعهم. إني سلم لمن صالمكم، وحرب لمن حاربكم، وولي لمن والاكم، وعدو لمن عاداكم. فأسأل الله الذي أكرمني بمعرفتكم ومعرفة أوليائكم ورزقني البراءة من أعدائكم أن يجعلني معكم في الدنيا والآخرة، وأن يثبت لي عندكم قدم صدق في الدنيا والآخرة، وأسأله أن يبلغني المقام المحمود لكم عند الله، وأن يرزقني طلب ثاري مع إمام هدى ظاهر ناطق بالحق منكم. وأسأل الله بحقكم وبالشأن الذي لكم عنده أن يعطيني بمصابي بكم أفضل ما يعطي مصابا بمصيبته، مصيبة ما أعظمها وأعظم رزيتها في الإسلام وفي جميع السماوات والأرض. اللهم اجعلني في مقامي هذا ممن تناله منك صلوات ورحمة ومغفرة. اللهم اجعل محياي محيا محمد وآل محمد، ومماتي ممات محمد وآل محمد. اللهم إن هذا يوم تبركت به بنو أمية وابن عاكلة الأكباد اللعين ابن اللعين على لسانك ولسان نبيك صلى الله عليه وآله في كل موطن وموقف وقف فيه نبيك صلى الله عليه وآله. اللهم لعن أبا سفيان ومعاوية ويزيد بن معاوية عليهم منك اللعنة أبد العابدين. وهذا يوم فرحت به آل زياد وآل مروان بقتلهم الحسين صلوات الله عليه. اللهم فضاعف عليهم اللعن منك والعذاب العليم. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك في هذا اليوم وفي موقفي هذا وأيام حياتي بالبراءة منهم واللعنة عليهم وبالموالاة لنبيك وآل نبيك عليه وعليهم السلام. اللهم لعن أول ظالم ظلم حق محمد وآل محمد وآخر تابع له على ذلك. اللهم لعن الإصابة التي جاحدت الحسين وشايعت وبايعت وتابعت على قتله. اللهم لعنهم جميعا. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. اللهم خص أنت أول ظالم باللعن مني وابدأ به أولا، ثم العن الثاني والثالث والرابع. اللهم لعن يزيد خامسا، والعن عبيد الله بن زياد وابن مرجان وعمر بن سعد وشمرا وآل أبي سفيان وآل زياد وآل مروان إلى يوم القيامة. سجدة. اللهم لك الحمد حمد الشاكرين، لك على مصابهم الحمد لله على عظيم رزيتي. اللهم ارزقني شفاعة الحسين يوم الورود، وثبت لي قدم صدق عندك مع الحسين وأصحاب الحسين الذين بذلوا محجهم دون الحسين عليه السلام. صلى الله عليك يا مولاي يا سيدنا المظلوم، ويا سيدنا العطشان، ويا سيدنا الغريب، يا أبا عبد الله، يا حسين، يا حسين، يا حسين، يا حسين. رحم الله من يقرأ الفاتحة مع الصلوات.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين، سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد صلى الله عليه محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. أما بعد، قال الله الحكيم في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولقد كتبنا في الزبور من بعد الذكر أن الأرض يريثها عبادي الصالحون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Our series of discussions are slowly edging to an end. In the last couple of nights, we've looked at a particular tradition which states that in this particular era that we're going through, Dhalal and Dhulamat is spreading in such a way that it becomes very difficult at times for the believer to distinguish between Haqq and Batil. You see, it says in a tradition that one day Rasulullah was sitting with his companions, and at that stage he said to them that, look, in this day and age there's one Haqq and there's one Batil. But he says, O Jabir, in the end of times there'll be Butlan, multiple Batils, and there'll be one Haqq. It'll be very difficult for people to differentiate what the truth is and what the truth isn't. So the tradition says Jabir begins to cry, and he says, if I make it to that time, how will I differentiate between Haqq and Batil? So Rasulullah replies, he says, remember, Haqq is like the sun. There can be multiple Butlan, but when the sun shines, it extinguishes all other Butlans. And so in this way, for those people who are searching truly, your heart tells you where Haqq is. You know, many a time people do say that, look, even within our own denomination, we're finding contrasting things. Differences of opinion when it comes to knowledge isn't a bad thing. What is when there's corruption. And that corruption leads to people's aqidah becoming corrupt. For that, remember, don't go out for your own nafs, that because this is in line and this makes my life easier, therefore I'm going to take this pathway. Look and see where your heart settles when it comes to the truth. And the truth is like the sun many a time. In the same way when Rasulullah says, sitting there, He says, Salam on my brothers. So the Ashab asked, are we not your brothers? He says, no, you're my companions, but you're not my brothers. My brothers are those people who are coming in the last days, who have not seen me, but at the same time, they have iman, they have faith on me. Now this hadith itself, if you take it as an individual hadith, is sufficient to actually emphasize the superiority of those people in the last days who are believers above and beyond the Sahaba itself. And this isn't a Shia tradition I'm narrating, it's a Sunni tradition. That those people who are truly on the faith, on the pathway, their maqam is greater than the ashab. And again, it's a discussion. And this is why there's no second to the Ahlul Bayt. Everything after that is extrapolation from tradition as to who's afdal. The bottom line is this: the greatest of all after Ahlul Bayt are the 72 in Karbala. And of course, Salman being at the 10th level of Iman, or Abu Dhar, or Miqdad. And contrasting that are the Sahabi or the Ashab of the Mahdi alayhi salam. Remember one thing, Uwais Qarani never saw the Prophet, but his ishq and his connection with the Prophet raised him to a rank which is far more loftier for us anyway, Shia. If you put Amir al-Mu'mineen to one side, all of Ashra Mubashara, because for us that hadith is not sahih. Uwais Qarani's maqam is greater than all of them. So what you find is, when people say, Shia don't believe in the Sahaba, Shia believe in the Sahaba. Of course they do. The difference is they have different stations. And that's where the difference comes in. So anyhow, moving forward, when we are in this particular stage, you find that when materialism increases, spirituality decreases. When spirituality decreases, it doesn't mean that people's thirst for spirituality stops. If you look in the 20th century and the 21st century being an extension of that, as materialism has spread and we've become extremely individualistic, going after money, and to be honest, money isn't a bad thing. It's when money possesses you. This is why the tradition says that in the last days, there are 6 things that are going to happen to the Shia. And some they say 9 and more, up to 50. But one of them is this: when the believer's qibla becomes money, meaning what? All of his focus is towards one thing. And a time like that is coming, and a time like that is here, to be honest. You look around the world, the vast majority of people are running towards money. If you have money, you have status in society. Now whatever society does, it shouldn't impact on the Shia, but today the Shia are like that. There's some centers in the world where you go that the people who lift up the alam, for example, are people who are of monetary value in their communities. Those people sitting on the boards, to those people on the front lines. Inshallah, it doesn't happen in our communities, but the fact is that there are places in the world that I've seen myself that it's like that. There are places in the world where the front line is reserved for those people who have money. Already Imam alayhi salam is saying that a time like that will come. That when the Shias become like that, no, then there's a problem. The reason being is this, that you lose your protection. The only thing Qibla should be is Kaaba or Allah. But look, when all of this happens, and when people are going for fame and fortune, it still doesn't fulfill their internal requirements. And for this reason, what do you find? You find that in the 20th century, people who became celebrities ran after spirituality. A huge movement in the West started, be it Hare Krishna, be it later on Kabbalah, be it Sufism, whatever you may call it. Different spiritualities popped up. And the purpose of the New Age movements, which took bits from here, bits from here, bits from here. The purpose? Because people were feeling empty. Any form of authentic spirituality is a struggle itself. The best example I can give you is this. Sometimes you go to somebody when you're sick and they give you a medicine and it needs 7 to 10 days to run its course. And then you go to someone, they give you an injection and within 5 minutes you're okay. You don't realize somebody's pumped you with steroids. Superficially you feel that you're doing well. But the fact is that 10 days or 7 days is required for a holistic movement to be able to rectify whatever issues there are inside. The same thing what you find is that people are looking for a quick fix. And in the 21st century, and as the Dhuhr gets closer, you will find many false types of mysticism and spirituality. The reason why I say this is this, because we've just discussed in the last couple of nights the concept of spirituality. Be very aware as well that there are also false types of spirituality where people are going to give you quick fixes so that you feel high. There's no quick fix. Remember, the first primacy is Sharia. You must pray, you must fast, you must go on Hajj, you must give zakat. These are the tenets, these are the principles. If a person is not going to Hajj, if they're not praying on time, if they're not reciting Salat al-Layl, if they're not reciting Ziyarat Ashra or Ziyarat al-Waritha, whichever it may be, the fact of the matter is that if you just follow what's been recommended to you, it's sufficient enough for you to get to that maqam. When people think about spirituality, they think about power, they think about control, they think about dominance. So remember, not every person who claims to be spiritual is spiritual. Even within this, in the same way as when you go into medicine, not everybody's a general practitioner. They're experts from one thing to another thing, from bones to lungs to liver to heart to brain to your nervous system. In the same way within spirituality, there's much more than that. So when you look around and you see somebody calculating something for somebody, telling the present, past, or future doesn't make you spiritual. It's a science. If somebody, see, remember one thing, there's two things. One is the study of irfan, one is the study of the occult. Don't ever conflate both of those things. Just because somebody is an arif, doesn't mean you can go to him and ask him that I want a solution to this. It's possible he may have, he may not have. The purpose of that arif is to take you to God. He's not going to care about your problems because he knows that these are juz'i. When David, the prophet, goes to a particular lady, he says, your maqam is so high that Allah has said that you're going to be my neighbor in heaven. So he asks, and the lady replies, she says, but there's nothing special about me. He says, you must be doing something. So she says, whenever a problem befalls, I wait patiently for Allah's relief. I don't cry. I don't even pray for it to go away, actually. What I do is I wait for Allah's relief. I follow the mashiach of Allah. He says, because of that, Allah's put you at that maqam. So look, Urafa generally are not the business to come to you and say, I'm going to give you a solution. They give you a solution of the heart. They give you a solution for your stage and your status so that your maqam can rise. Not saying that there aren't Urafa who wouldn't be able to help you. Again, these are two different fields though. Ulum al-Ghariba is something else. For example, the mother of Ulum al-Ghariba, the occult, is Najum, astrology. Why? Because through astrology, there's multiple different things to be worked out. And I don't want to go into a discussion in astrology or any of the occult sciences. I'm just giving you an outline because there's a conclusion I want to get to. You may see somebody who's warid in ilm Raml. Raml was taught by what? Who? Daniel. It goes back to Daniel, Dawood, and the entire silsila of Bani Israel. There are certain ulum which were specific with Bani Israel which have been passed down to us. The only authentic one, which is only reserved for us, is ilm Jafr. Right? And all of these things have their time and their place. If somebody's writing a ta'weez, they're doing a murabba, whatever it may be, this is all a cult. This has nothing to do with true spirituality to get to Allah. Maybe there's a time and a place for that. Maybe there's a solution which is required for somebody for that to be done. But essentially, irfan is different from that. And I think that's one thing that we need to differentiate. Just because somebody's writing something doesn't make him an arif billah. Many people who are coming into this valley, their niyyah is not correct. So there's another section of ulum al-Ghariba as well. Taskhir, domination over people. Jinn, imps, over a situation. You must remember, that's not irfan either. Or for example, somebody knows numerology. That's not irfan. To be able to control, possess, that's not irfan. What is? Irfan is a ma'arif of Allah. It's two different things. So bear that in mind. When you go into the valley of spirituality, if you're looking for somebody to teach you, these are not the ways of teaching. You can't sit down all of a sudden, open up Bahr al-Gharaib and think you can recite all of the dhikrs in there as well. Now remember, the fine line here is this, between ulum al-ghariba and otherwise, you'll find some people give out the names of God. Now surely this can't be the occult, but this must be something in relation to solving our problems. In the same way, verses of the Quran. Yes, why? Quran is a shifa. There are verses of the Quran. You open it up and you see. For example, Surah Waqi'ah. Surah Waqi'ah recited at a particular time is meant to increase rizq. In the same way, Surah Fatiha recited a particular amount of time is meant to cure you. In the same way, Surah Mulk, if you want to die on the pathway, you recite that. In the same way, and I can go on, if a person has a debt, there's particular surahs that you should be reciting. One of them, for example, is Surah Muzammil. So we can go on in depth. You have an enemy, there's a surah you can recite there a particular amount of times. Surah Fil, and so forth. So the idea is this, is that irfan? Actually, that's not irfan either. Yes, it can take you to a level. Why? Because remember, your intention is to resolve your problem. Your problem is worldly, right? But the reason why this is important is because then the Urafa who have spiritual problems use the very same things in a different methodology to be able to remove those spiritual diseases. What are spiritual diseases? Lying, backbiting, cheating, uncertainty, lack of faith. All of these things, spiritual vices, the same verses, the names on the Quran are used in a particular way to cure that as well. So for that then, it requires a doctor which is elevated above and beyond ulum al-ghariba. But at the same time, ijaz is required. Give you an example. Let's say you go to Bahr al-Gharaib and there's so many afkar in there. You can't just open it up and start reading. Why? Because you've got to be amil of the amal to be able to give it, to be able to use it, and etc. There's sharait and shurut. All of those sharait and shurut are never written in these books. You can't go into Shams al-Ma'arif, for example, and just start. The conditions are not there. The reason being is that the person writing knows that it can be used wrongly by somebody. They don't put the conditions in. When they don't put the conditions in, then what happens? Then it doesn't work for you, or if it does, it backfires on you. So therefore, a true spiritual master can give you all the sharait. Is this irfan though? Actually, it's not. Why isn't it irfan as such? Because irfan, when used with the intention of ma'rifatullah, there's a difference there. But surely then we need to resolve the differences in our life first before to get that. Yes, agreed. And then the next question comes, okay, if I want to go into the valley of irfan, where do I find somebody? Now remember, if you go into history, and I'm not going to tell you how, where, how, but let's just look at it in one. In history, what you find is that the Imams taught people certain knowledge. The entire Sufi tariqats which you find developed around the Imams. All of the Sufi tariqats go back to an Imam. All of the mainstream Sufi tariqats go back to the Aim alayhimus salam. Right? What was the purpose of that? It was a methodology towards God. Today when you look at, and by the way, there were Shia tariqats, there were Sunni tariqats. The biggest Shia tariqat, Safavis. Safiuddin Ardabili, who was also an alim as well, but he was a Sufi in that respect. Entire Iran became Shia because of Sufi Shias. Essentially the Darwish. And after that, there have been many Sufi tariqats as well, which are Shia, and which were Sunni, right? In this modern day and age, it's more like a gang or a club. And it's fine, people get together, they do a bit of Allah, Allah, they feel better. But the fact is, the purpose in those days was to give you tarbiyah. So what happens? The school of Irfan comes along. What is the school of Irfan? The school of Irfan essentially is really the tasawwuf of the ulama. Meaning what? Meaning, to become kamil and complete, you have to know Sharia. You have to know the hudud of Sharia. So when you look at somebody like Sayyid Mahdi Bahr al-Ulum, what are they? Marja. But they're also Arif. What's Ayatollah Bahjat? Marja. What is he? Arif. So what are they teaching? They're teaching first and foremost, understand the Sharia so that you don't do anything to violate God's law. And then after that, what's most important for you to do? Then from there's a guidance that takes place. And these ulama who are urafa as well, they give you the complete package essentially. This is where the school of Irfan comes from. Develop it forward. Is every alim an arif? No. Do they have their own chains? Yes, they do. Today, if you go to Qum, you've got this chain of Allama Tabatabai. Does it need a chain that it becomes like a Sufi tariqat? Well, there are many chains with it. Remember one thing, Irfani chains are not one either within Qum and Najaf. Remember one thing, Said Mahdi Bahr al-Ulum was from the chain of Bidabadi, Muhammad Bidabadi. There's an entire chain which is coming. Said Ali Qadi also had experience from the Bidabadi chain, but he himself is from that line of Said Muhammad Shushtari. So they're different levels and different lines as well. This Said Ali Qadi line, whose teacher was Ahmad Karbala'i and Khuli Hamadani and Muhammad Ali Shushtari, goes back to Mullah Jula. It's a different line altogether. But look, rather than complicate things, the reason why I'm saying is that different strands of spirituality as well. Not every scholar is an Arif. Not every scholar is Kamil to be able to take you by the hand and take you up. So what do you do in that situation? Let's say, look, you're living in New York. You're living in London. You're living in Edinburgh. You're living in Sydney. What do you do? Remember one thing. There is enough in Sharia that if you do what's the halal of Allah and you refrain from the haram, which the muharramats, it is sufficient for God to open up a pathway. I'll give you an example. Today I was speaking to a friend of mine who's a mujtahid, sahib an-nazar, a person who for 30 years studied the sciences. Somebody who Ayatollah Wahid Khurasani to me said, this guy is sahib an-nazar. That person said to me that, again, Ayatollah Wahid is probably the biggest marja in Qum at the moment. So we were having a discussion and he was telling me about how some of the ulama in India became spiritual and how they became, or they came onto this pathway. So he gave an example of his grandfather. He said, my grandfather went to Shaheed Thalis's mazar, Qadi Nurullah Shushtari. He said when he went there, he became a khadim over there. Also his grandfather was an alim, but he became a khadim to serve at the shrine of the Sayyid, Shaheed Thalith. And he says that for 40 days, everything is in the hadith, right? What do you do? Refrain from sin. Recite Salatul Layl, for example. Pray your prayers awwala waqt. Ayatullah Bahjat says, a person who prays awwala waqt taqweenan, Allah will raise them. So he did all of this. So what happened? In a mukashafa, in a vision or in a dream, Shaykh Thalis comes to him, gives him a dhikr. Now he starts that for 40 days. Again, there's a development that takes place. Remember, in the same way when you go onto YouTube, YouTube knows which of the searches of yours you're doing the most, so it gives you a recommendation. The same thing. Let's say, for example, you're a businessman. At the moment we're going through COVID-19. You're in the PPE industry. At the beginning when you started, you had no clue. Now you know what 3M masks are. Now you know what KN95 is. Now you know what FFP2 and 3 is. And then after that you went into gloves. So let's say you know what, for example, Hartlager is, V-glove, Top glove. And then after that this is Kimberly-Clark gloves, and you know the prices, and you know what stock it is, and you know what this is, and slowly you start building up. Why? Because it's the network and the circle. Within 3 months you're an expert. In the same way within this, you do a dhikr, you purify yourself, something comes to you, and then all of a sudden you find the right people start coming. You become like a magnet. Why? On top of your search are these people. So people start coming to you, and throughout your life when you require it the most, either through a vision, a dream, or some people go to Amir al-Mu'mineen, some people find a dhikr, and in this way, slowly but surely, you start developing yourself. This is why the Quran says, "Ittaqullah wa yu'allimukum Allah." Allah teaches a person. You don't need to go to a person. You just need to observe the rules and the regulations that Allah says. There is enough within Shiism. One tasbih of Fatima Zahra alayhi salam is so powerful that it's sufficient enough as a guide for you. But do the things which are wajib on you to do. Do the things which have been recommended. As all of the ulama have said, pray awwala waqt. If you have a big issue and you really want to get into this value of irfan, because so many people have been messaging and saying, how do we get involved? What can we do? How do we do this? I know this Pir Sahib. I know this Murshid. You don't need any of that. All you need is your Risala Amaliyah. What do you need to do? Pray awwala waqt. You want to pray more than that? Khufayla. You want to pray more than that? Salatul Layl. You want to pray more than that? Istighfar, salawat. And then after that you see, within 40 days of refraining from muharramat, nur of Allah comes. The wa'ad of Allah is there. Ittaqullah wa yu'allimukum Allah. You'll see that slowly but surely things start opening to you. That's what's important. You don't need to join some kind of an order. Yes, they may have things passed down to them, but how do you know they're kamil? Today, a lot of things are being done because of the dunya. And especially those people who are from the subcontinent. Every single person is a pir or pirzada. All of them are empty. Just because you possess one jinn or muwakkil doesn't make you anything. A true peer or pirzada never comes out. And then the idda'a that I'm connected to the 12th Imam and this mukashif or so on. True person who's for Allah doesn't do that. There's no idda'a there. He quietly gets along with what he needs to do. He or she knows. You see, they say there are 360 servants of the Imam. At any given time, they're helpers of the Imam. One dies, another one replaces. People like that are there in this world, who know and they see and they look, and they've been given the responsibility by the Imam to come and say, do this. They themselves search. This line of Qadi that I was telling you about that goes to Mullah Jula, when asked the question to Mullah Jula, how did you get here? He says, it was one of the Naibeen of the Imam that I thought was just a normal person, who at the end of his life guided me. How? Mullah Jula was an alim in Kashan who was responsible for his masjid. He says one day what happened was that a soldier came, and that soldier's duty was to serve the community, and it was a time where the soldier was required for peace. And when he came, the first thing he did was he found me, and he said to me, listen, I'm going to give you money. I want you to go and prepare food, and I'm going to come and take that food every evening from you. Why? Because where I'm staying, I don't think that there's any inclination of what taharat, najasat, halal and haram is. So Mullah Chula was thinking, this guy's a soldier, and he's coming to me. So he says every night I used to prepare bread for him, naan for him. He said a night came where he came to me and he said, leave the mosque open, I'm going to worship. At 1 o'clock at night time, there's going to be a knock on the door. There's going to be two men, and you'll recognize them because there's going to be nur on their face. They're going to tell you that I've died. You should go with them and help them to give me ghusl and kafan, and then after that pray prayer over my body. Prior to 1 o'clock, don't disturb me. Mullah Jula says, oh my God. So he waits. 1 o'clock comes, knock on the door comes, two men are there, both of the men say, come. This soldier has died. Ghusl and kafan. Mullah Jula said, I grabbed this guy's foot. I said, listen, who was this guy who died? For me, he was just a normal person. But then, from what he was doing, I realized he's something special. But who is he? So these two men reply. He said he had a responsibility from the 12th Imam that he was fulfilling. So Mullah Jula then says, he says, look, I want this responsibility. Can you take me to? Can you take me to him? He says, okay. We'll take you to him, then after that is yours. So they took him. Apparently there was a tent there. And he goes inside. And there was a man standing there. And he says, this was the most Nurani moment of my life. And this man says to him, do you want the position of that soldier? Mullah Chula says, initially I didn't understand. He said, but I'm not a warrior. I'm not young anymore. I said, no, do you want his position? And hence I got his position. After that, Ayatollah said, Ali Shushtari says, Muhammad Ali Shushtari says, he says that when he was the Qadi, this is how he then met Mullah Chula. He says that I was a Qadi at the time. Now, with Mullah Chula having learned what he did, he comes to said Muhammad Ali Shushtari, and he says, look, it's not for you to be a Qadi. There's damnation within this. So Shushtari thought, what's he talking about? There was a case that had come, and that case was of a yatim. It was to do with mal of a yatim. So he said, Jula comes again to him and says, look, there's damnation in this, remember, to take the right of an orphan. And he was really kind of freaked out, perplexed. And in the moment where he was really thinking what the solution was, Mullah Jula again came. He says, go to so-and-so place, dig it up. Under the ground there is this kid's inheritance. Once that was found, Shushtari takes a step back. He says, look, from today onwards, I'm not going to be a Qadi. He comes to Jula, says, who are you? Jula says, I'll teach you. Take the dhikr, 40 days, come back to me. 40 days came back. He says, I want you to pack everything up, go to Najaf. In 6 months' time, you'll see me for the final time in Wadi al-Salam. So Muhammad al-Shushtari says that in Wadi al-Salam, I saw him for the final time. He gave me something. And that opened up my entire basira. I could see everything after that. Chula disappeared, never to come back again. He says, but then I taught. And I taught Khuli Hamadani. And he taught Ahmad Karbalai. And he taught Sayyid Ali Qadhi Marhum. And that's the whole line that came down from that. So look, the reason why I'm saying this is, you perfect yourself, you raise your own standards, and you'll see that help comes from the ghaib. You don't need to go and sit next to some Pir Sahib. That Pir Sahib probably needs help. You go and gain taqwa. You see, Allah will help you. So look, the reason why I mention all of this is, as a disclaimer, that just because somebody has an ability doesn't necessarily mean that they can guide you in this field. The biggest guide that you have is your Risala Amaliyah. Come to know yourself, work on your akhlaq. Slowly Allah will open up the pathway for you. So look, there's one more thing I would mention here. Because it is Akhir al-Zaman, the best things that we can do, and to put it forward, two things, and I want to consolidate quickly, go through this because we don't have much time. I raised an issue a number of days ago. We were discussing this about 7 huquq that a brother has for another brother, or a sister has for another sister, from the believers. I want to quickly go through that. 7 things are this. Either we apply these 7 things, otherwise we're outside of the wilaya of Allah. And though I was thinking not to mention it because ignorance is bliss, but I want to make your life difficult, so let's mention it anyway. 3 of them are to do with this. It is incumbent on you to go and visit your brother when he's sick. But visiting your brother or sister when they're sick doesn't mean that you sit there for an hour or half an hour. No, go quickly, see them and come. As you know, an ill person, if you're going to sit there trying to crack jokes or talk to that poor person who's already sick, it's probably going to aggravate a sickness. So when the tradition says go in visiting somebody sick, it doesn't mean just sit there for 2 hours or 1 hour. It means go see them, give them your dua, go away. One thing. Second thing, if that person is to die, it is incumbent that you attend his janazah. And thirdly, you never mention anything negative after he's died or she's died. Always only positively. 3 things from the 7. So those things are easy. You can do that. Now coming to the 4 things which are difficult. First, what you want for yourself, want for your brother. And if you're not clean bowled on that, now look at the second one. In fact, I'll leave the second one for the end. So I'll put another second one in. This is the second one. If your brother ever comes to you and they're financially in strife, or ever comes to you for help, it is incumbent upon you, whatever potential you have, to be able to help them. If you can help them this much, help them this much. If you can help them that much, that much. Only you can gauge that. And remember, if Allah asks you on the Day of Judgment, or if Amir al-Mu'mineen asks you on the Day of Judgment, or at the moment of your death, if he asks you, your potential was here and you only gave that much, that's up to you, your consciousness. What else? It is haram for you to backbite about your brother. So you cannot backbite at all. Talk negatively even if it's true, because backbiting is not slander. Slander means you make things up or you go on the run. Backbiting is categorically the fact that that person has a deficiency. You clocked them, you saw them, as they say in South London, you clocked them doing something not so good. And they realized you clocked them. And they felt embarrassed. It's haram for you to reveal it. That takes our count even further now. So look, let me give you one more then. And that's sufficient. And that's this. You should never harbor negativity in your heart for your brother. That's very hard. Actually, no, that's not very hard. You know why? Firstly, the reason why I shouldn't harbor negativity is because negativity breeds negativity. I'll give you an example. Have you noticed sometimes after a very long time when you go and see someone, nothing has happened between you and them, but there's a negativity in your heart? It's because that person's feeling the negativity. This is why the believer, if you want to know your maqam in the eyes of somebody else, look into your own heart and see what your maqam is, or what their maqam is in your heart. That's how you can reciprocate it. And that also applies with God as well. When somebody wants to ask the Imam, how do I know what my maqam is in the eyes of Allah? Well, look inside of yourself and see. If you can stop and leave everything for the sake of Allah, then Allah will leave everything for you. Is it difficult? Of course it is. Somebody messaged to say, how do we take out negativity? Actually remember something. Don't hate a person. Look at the negative quality and hate that. Learn to free your heart of negativity for somebody. Why? Because it is attached to the ego. Somebody's wronged you, okay. But when you let it go, you notice letting it go, you feel so much lighter, you feel so much more at ease. Don't ever sleep at night time where you have negativity for somebody. Leave it to Allah, and Allah is the best of hakims. So look, that on one side. In the next 2 minutes or so, I just want to say one more thing, and then we bring it to a close. And that's this. What becomes important in this time and day and age, especially with COVID-19, is to give sadaqah. Sadaqah, according to a tradition, has 6 benefits. Some say it has 7 benefits. 3 of them in the hereafter, which I won't mention because we don't have time. 3 or 4 in this world, very quickly. Firstly, it removes bala. COVID-19 is a bala. So every day, try and give sadaqah. And remember, when something inflicts a lot of people, then the concentration of dua also dilutes unless if it's communal. The best example that we have is in the time of Jonah. The people of Jonah communally prayed for Allah to remove the bala that was coming on them. Second thing though, then it requires for you to give more sadaqah, or do a qurbani, or to feed the poor. And that's very powerful. So with dua, you have to supplement it because it's a waba that's gone all over. So you pray, you feed the poor, and you give sadaqah. So what, number 1, sadaqah removes bala. 2, it increases your life, sadaqah does. 3, increases your rizq. And 4, removes illnesses. And that's my time come to an end. Look, today, we have a huge responsibility. If Zahra alayhi salam gives us permission, I want you for just 1 second. Close your eyes. Go to Medina. In the darkness of the night, with his quietness, walk towards Baqi. Look at the darkness of Baqi. A mother rests in Baqi. You're going to give condolences to that mother today. Who is that mother? That mother is that person who, when a voice came to Medina, قَدْ قُتِلَ الْحُسَيْنُ بِكَرْبَلَا, she says to Fadl, get me my stick. Stick comes. She goes into the Sahan, looks towards Najaf and says, my master Amir al-Mu'mineen, forgive me that my son Abbas wasn't able to protect your son Hussein. Look, you have great aqidah on Abbas. Whenever you go through trial and tribulation, your mothers have said to you, go under the flag of Abbas. As I begin to recite this, I'm going to recite slowly. I myself can't take the masayib of Abbas. There shouldn't be an eye today that's not crying. Haqq of Abbas is that you cry for him. Look, today we can't be together. We're sitting scattered all over the world. Today, remember one thing. Abbas is Babul Hawaij. What do you give? You get back in the way of Ahlul Bayt. If I had the opportunity, I would recite a very long masayif to tell you what Abbas is. But because of the situation, I won't be able to. I want to give you a story. Sayyid Mahdi Bahr al-Ulum is the marja. It was raining so much in Karbala that they say the shrine of Abbas was damaged. One of the khuddam of the shrine come to Sayyid Mahdi Bahr al-Ulum in Najaf. They say, Sayyid Mahdi, water has gone into the shrine of Abbas. Can you come and help us to remove the water from around the qabr of Abbas? Sayyid Mahdi, marja of the time, says yes. He goes. Both of them sit there, removing slowly the water. So the khadim looks up, and something comes into the heart of the khadim. He says to Sayyid Mahdi Bahr al-Ulum, he says, Sayyid, you've told us that Abbas was so tall. Why is it that this grave is so small? Sayyid Mahdi takes off his amama, chucks it on the ground, hits his head on the wall of the grave. He says, I wish you never asked me that question. He says, but now that you've asked me, let me tell you why his grave is so small. He says, when Abbas fell and they cut his neck, they said that horses were trampling over his body and men were coming. Whatever they had in their hand, they were hitting his body so much so that when Imam Zain al-Aberdeen came to bury him, when he picked up his rib, the other rib collapsed. When he picked up his shoulder, the other shoulder collapsed. He took all of the pieces of Abbas. This is why his grave is small. And may Fatima Zahra accept your tears. Look, I know you won't be able to take the masayib of Abbas. This is what I'm going to recite slowly. Remember, when tears come into your eyes, dua is accepted. In Iraq, they say there are 3 Babul Hawaijs. Imam Musa ibn Ja'far is one. Sayyid Muhammad in Balad is 2. But the biggest door for the du'as to be answered is Abul Fadl Abbas. You're sitting today next to Abul Fadl Abbas. Why? Because when we start the Musibah of Abbas, your soul travels towards Karbala. Now imagine if you're walking through Bain al-Haramain and you're coming towards the Zariya of Abbas. And when you come to the Zariya of Abbas and you look at it for the first time, what does Sayyid al-Shuhada say? Sayyid al-Shuhada says to Abul Fadl Abbas, these are my guests. For 3 days you're the guest of Hussein. They say when the news came that Abbas had been killed, Banin comes out. She says, Bashir, she wanted to verify. Bashir, which Hussein is it that you talk about? Says the son of Zahra. Says, how is it possible that the son of Zahra has been killed? My Abbas was with him. How is it possible? Says, Bibi, your son Abbas was also killed. She says, how is it possible that my son Abbas was killed? Said he was hit on the back of the head. She says, Bashir, I don't believe you. Says, why? Says, no mother has born a son like Abbas like I have. I know Abbas. There's no way somebody can attack Abbas from the back. She says, but your son had no arms. His arms were chopped off. They say, Banin looks up. Stick falls out of the hand, falls to the ground, stands up again, says, Bashir, just tell me one thing. When my son Abbas fell to the ground, he didn't have any arms. Did his chest hit the ground first, or did his head hit the ground first? if you ever go to Medina and you go to the grave of al Banin, ask al Banin, your son fell once. Sayyidah Zainab's arms were tied behind her back. Every time she fell, did her chest hit the ground first or did her head hit the ground first? You know, they say the haqq of crying is when your voice is raised. This is when the sixth Imam says that may the rahmah of Allah befall all of those voices that cry for the sake of my Jad. Let me start off from here. Look, I haven't even started to recite the Masa'ib of Abbas yet. So let me recite this. Amir al-Mu'mineen, I'm going to go slowly as I said. Look, you ask for hajat. You ask for hajat. Inshallah, for the sake of Bab al-Hawaj, all of your hajat will be fulfilled. They say Amir al-Mu'mineen was looking for a wife. He says to his brother Aqil, find me a particular wife. You know the story. I'm going to accelerate. Aqil finds a woman. Aqil finds an honorable family. He goes to the father of that family. As he goes, he says that we want your daughter. So at that moment the man replies. He says, for who? He replies, for my brother, Ali. The head of the tribe can't believe it. He says, yes, for me. So what happens then? Aqil replies. He says, listen, we're Banu Hashim. You ask the daughter first. We don't say yes until the daughter doesn't say yes. This man gets up and he runs to his wife. When his wife sees him, she knows the head of the tribes never show any emotions. She says, what day has come where you're showing this type of emotion? He replies, he says that Ali ibn Abi Talib's brother has come to ask for our daughter's hand in marriage. Did you say yes? He said, I said yes, but they said Banu Hashim don't accept until the woman that itself says yes. You know what happens? They go and ask one of the friends, say, go ask Fatima, her name was Fatima, ask Fatima if she accepts this proposal. As one of the friends went in and they asked Fatima, what happens? What happens? Fatima turns around and says, she says, last night I saw a dream. In my dream I saw there was a marriage dress there, and when I looked at the marriage dress, I saw a woman dressed in black come towards me. Who was she? She said, I'm Fatima to Zahra. She puts the dress on me. She says, tomorrow when the proposal comes for my Ali, you accept that proposal, because from your progeny is going to come Abbas, and that Abbas is going to help my Hussein. Look how Zahra is. Even after her death, she's taking care of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Fatima says yes. This al-Banin then says yes. Tradition says swords of Banu Hashim are there. al-Banin goes underneath the swords. She comes in Medina to the house of Zahra. She sits down on the floor. She says, how can I go into that house that Zahra was in this house? They say Zainab comes forward. Kulthum comes forward, grabs them by the arms, takes Banin into the house. They say when Amir al-Mu'mineen came into the house, he called Banin by the name Fatima. When Fatima looked at the tears in the eyes of the children of Zahra, she says, Amir al-Mu'mineen, from today onwards, don't call me Fatima here. Fatima's Fatima, there's only one Fatima, and from today call me Banin. Amir al-Mu'mineen prays. Who does he pray for? A son, Abbas. Abbas comes into the world. Amir al-Mu'mineen had this tradition. Whenever a child would be born, he would go and kiss the forehead. They say when he comes into the room where Banin had delivered, Abbas was wrapped in a white sheet. He opens it up. He smiles. He begins to kiss Abbas on the right arm and Abbas on the left arm. Banin's tears come in her eyes. She says, Amir al-Mu'mineen, I've seen you kiss all all of your children on the forehead? Is it because Abbas is the son of a slave that you kiss him on the right arm and you kiss him on the left arm? Amir al-Mu'mineen says, Baleen, that's not the case. Abbas is my son, but Abbas is going to go to Karbala. His right arm is going to be cut. Abbas begins to grow. Like, I can't narrate it. Shia of Amir al-Mu'mineen, only if we were together to mourn together. Battle of Siffin comes. You know the proudest moment for a father is? When he sees the bravery of his son. They say there was no prouder moment for this old father. Amir al-Mu'mineen would say, look at my Abbas fight in the battle of Siffin. Amir al-Mu'mineen with pride. And what was Abbas saying to Malik al-Ashtar? Today you'll see Dhul Fiqar Ali, the inheritor of this Dhul Fiqar. Look and see how I fight. Look, I can't recite anymore. You won't be able to hear it. I just want to say two things and that's it. 9th of Muharram comes. And they say Sayyid al-Shuhada sends two people. One of them is Zuhair. Go ask from the army of Umar ibn Sa'd. We want one more night. Abbas is with them. These two old men, as they begin to write, one says to the other, do you remember the day when Amir al-Mu'mineen got married? He says, I'm going to have a son like Abbas. Abbas is going to protect Hussein. As Abbas begins to listen, he can't take it anymore. He puts his hand on the reins of his horse and holds it back. He says, don't say any more now. Just get me permission from my master, and until tomorrow you'll see that I'll attack this army and I'll finish this army. Ashura day comes. One person goes, his body comes back. Two people go, his body comes back. Three people go, his body comes back. Banu Hashim begin to go. A body of Ali Akbar comes back. Abbas is looking at Imam Hussein's face. Qasim comes back. On and Muhammad come back. Eventually a time comes. Abul Fadl Abbas says, Mawla, can I now go in? Reply comes, but you're my standard bearer. He says, Mawla, what army is left now? Let me go now. Imam Hussein doesn't give him ijazah. As Abbas is walking, he comes and he sees in a tent, a small girl is there. She picks up a container of water. She shakes it, it's empty. She puts the coldness on her lips. She puts the coldness on her face. Abbas sees his moment, comes forward. Sakina, would you like some water? Do you want me to get you some water? She says, yes, uncle. He says, just on one condition. Go and ask your father to give me permission to go. Sakina goes running, smiling. She says, Father, please give ijazah to my Ammu Abbas to go and to get us some water. Imam Hussein looks up. He says, Sakina, do you know what you're asking for? Sakina comes back. She says, oh young girls, oh children of Banu Hashim, oh children of Ashab Hussein, let's get together. Get all of your containers of water. No water is coming. My Abbas is going into the battlefield. Look, if I could recite any more, I would do. You know what the tradition says? I can't recite. I'm just going to give you two things. My heart can't take it. I'm going to recite slowly. Your nasib now. Tears come into your eyes. Your dua is accepted. Your nasib now. This small girl sits down. Have you ever seen a a small girl? She sits down with all of her faith. You know, children have a lot of faith. They're so pure. When you see a child, you can look at the purity of that child. This girl turns around and says, water is coming. But when she looks into the distance and she sees the flag fall to the right-hand side, she takes her flask, she chucks it on the ground, she raises her hands, she says, children, I'm going to do dua. You say Ameen. She raises her hands, says, Allah, make sure my uncle comes back. I wish I couldn't. I'm not able to recite. I'll just say one thing. They say when Abbas fell to the ground, in the tradition it says just before he fell to the ground, he had a water container in his mouth. When they chopped his right arm, he put it on his left arm. When they chopped his left arm, he put it in his mouth. They say when Mal'oon comes forward, when Mukhtar grabs Hurmala, he says, Hurmala, what did you do on that day? Hurmala says, I fired 3 arrows. Says, what was the first arrow? He says, when Hussein was on the horse, moving from right to left, and everybody had been killed, I fired an arrow that went through the mouth of Hussein, that Hussein fell to the ground. Second thing I did was fired an arrow that Ali Asghar's. Third, I fired an arrow onto the water of Abbas. Abbas raised his head. Have you seen a person pray? They raise their hands. Abbas had no hands to raise. He raises his head to the sky. He says, Allah, I just have one dua. Make sure this water gets back to Sakina, because Sakina is thirsty. A voice comes from the sky. Abbas, we've not accepted your dua, but we've made you mustajab al-da'wah. From today onwards, you're Bab al-Hawaij. Whoever asks for me, you can give. So he says, Allah then, accept my second dua. I feel embarrassed from Sakina. Make sure my body never goes back. They say when Abbas gives his final salam to Sayyid al-Shuhada, they say Sayyid al-Shuhada held his back. Sayyid al-Shuhada falls to the ground. Sayyid al-Shuhada can't walk. When he comes to the body of Abbas, there was blood in Abbas's eyes. Abbas couldn't see. You know what he says? He says, oh person, don't kill me yet. My Mawla Hussein is coming. Mawla Hussein says, Abbas, I'm your brother. You know what Mawla Abbas says? He says, Mawla, I wouldn't have given you the zahma, but there's blood in my eyes. My mother said, when I was born, I did your ziyarah. Now that I'm leaving, I want to do your ziyarah. Can you clean the blood? Mawla Hussein takes his abba, rubs the blood from the eyes of Abbas. You know why Abbas had blood in his eyes? Final thing I'm going to say. I can't take it now. I can't recite anymore. In Karbala, for all of those people who are from Iraq, you'll know this. There was a marja by the name of Ayatollah Yahya Yathrabi. Yahya Yathrabi goes to the shrine of Abbas. A wise was reciting. You know what he was reciting? He was reciting this. An arrow went into the eye of Abbas. They say Yahya Yathrabi can't take it anymore. He says to the person when he came down, he says, oh wise, don't ever recite that. Firstly, I'm an old man. But secondly, I don't know if the hadith is correct or not. That night, Ayatollah Yahya Yathrabi says, when I went to sleep, I saw Abul Fadl Abbas come into my dream. Abbas just said one thing to me. Why did you stop my wise from reciting? Yahya Yathrabi says, maybe the hadith was weak. Abul Fadl Abbas says, no, the hadith is strong. Arrow did go into my eye. He says, Yahya Yathrabi, do you know how painful it is when something goes into your eye? He says, it was hurting me so much. When something goes into somebody's eyes, they have hands to pull out. He says, I didn't have any arms. I was moving my body left and right to try and remove the arrow. As the pain increased, I wanted to call my Mawla Hussein, but I knew he was gharib. He was alone. I knew Sayyidah Zainab was there. As I'm moving my head side to side, I don't have the ability to move the arrow out. So I put my head between my knees to try and take out the arrow. But as I tried to dislodge it, the pain began to increase and increase and increase, and it was hurting me. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't call Hussein. I looked towards Najaf and I said, Father, come and help me, because Abbas is... Matam Hussein.
یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین، جب ردا سر سے چینی میں صدا دیتی رہی، تو نہ آیا غازی، جب ردا سر سے چینی میں صدا دیتی رہی، تو نہ آیا غازی، جب ردا سر سے چینی میں صدا دیتی رہی، تو نہ آیا غازی۔ آل عمران نے کہا اور زندہ نے کہا، یہ بہن قید ہوئی، تو نہ آیا غازی، جب ردا سر سے چینی میں صدا دیتی رہی، تو نہ آیا غازی۔ ہم کو پانی نہ ملے تیری خوشبو تو رہے، تیرے بازو نہ کٹے چاہے مشکی زاچدے، یہ مگر ہو نہ سکا تیرے بازو ہے جدا، مجھ پہ ہے تشنہ-دہی، تو نہ آیا غازی، جب ردا سر سے چینی میں صدا دیتی رہی، تو نہ آیا غازی۔ دھوپ میں تو تھا شجر، تجھ سے آباد تھا گر، ہے برہنا میرا سر، کیا نہیں تجھ کو خبر، اے علمدار وفا اس بہن کو باخدا، تجھ سے دارستی بری، تو نہ آیا غازی، جب ردا سر سے چینی میں صدا دیتی رہی، تو نہ آیا غازی۔ آ گئی شام علم، لٹ گئے اہل حرم، ریت پر جلتی ہوئی ہو گیا ٹھنڈا علم، پرسہ دینے کے لیے مجھ سے ملنے کے لیے آ گئے بابا علی، تو نہ آیا غازی، جب ردا سر سے چینی میں صدا دیتی رہی، تو نہ آیا غازی۔ کیا کہوں شیر میرے بیردا ہم کو لیے، یہ مسلمان سارے شہر در شہر گئے، خلقت کوفہ کبھی خلقت شام کبھی، بارہا ہم پہ ہنسی، تو نہ آیا غازی، جب ردا سر سے چینی میں صدا دیتی رہی، تو نہ آیا غازی۔ کتنی بے بستی بہل اے شہنشاہ وفا، نام لے لے کے میرا جب یہ ظالم نے کہا، ناز تھا جس پہ تجھے اب بلاؤ نہ اسے، اور میں روتی رہی، تو نہ آیا غازی، جب ردا سر سے چینی میں صدا دیتی رہی، تو نہ آیا غازی۔ قید خانے میں قضا جب سکینہ کو ملی، دیکھ کرتے کا کفن بچی دفنائی گئی، اس گرینا میں تیرا صورت ناد علی، دکھ میں دہراتی رہی تو نایا غازی، جب ردا سر سے چھینی میں صدا دیتی رہی تو نایا غازی۔
اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجہم۔ عباس تیرا حق ہے زمانہ تجھے روئے، عباس تیرا حق ہے زمانہ تجھے روئے، جب شام و سحر فاطمہ زہرا تجھے روئے، جب شام و سحر فاطمہ زہرا تجھے روئے، عباس تیرا حق ہے زمانہ تجھے روئے، درا لیے پہرے پہ ستمگار کھڑا ہے، درا لیے پہرے پہ ستمگار کھڑا ہے، کیسے تیرے لاشے پہ سکینہ تجھے روئے، کیسے تیرے لاشے پہ سکینہ تجھے روئے، عباس تیرا حق ہے زمانہ تجھے روئے، جس وقت اٹھایا نہ گیا لاشا جواں کا، جس وقت اٹھایا نہ گیا لاشا جواں کا، شہ اس گھڑی اکبر سے زیادہ تجھے روئے، شہ اس گھڑی اکبر سے زیادہ تجھے روئے، عباس تیرا حق ہے زمانہ تجھے روئے، زینب نے کہا شام میں غریباں میں ہے غازی، زینب نے کہا شام میں غریباں میں ہے غازی، بے پردہ مجھے دیکھ کے بابا تجھے روئے، بے پردہ مجھے دیکھ کے بابا تجھے روئے، عباس تیرا حق ہے زمانہ تجھے روئے، سجدے کے لیے جب لیا ہاتھوں کا سہارا، سجدے کے لیے جب لیا ہاتھوں کا سہارا، تو سجاد مصلی پہ ہمیشہ تجھے روئے، سجاد مصلی پہ ہمیشہ تجھے روئے، عباس تیرا حق ہے زمانہ تجھے روئے، مشکیزہ کہیں جسم کہیں ہاتھ کہیں ہے مشکیزہ، کہیں جسم کہیں ہاتھ کہیں ہے، جا جا کے کہاں فاطمہ زہرا تجھے روئے، جا جا کے کہاں فاطمہ زہرا تجھے روئے، عباس تیرا حق ہے زمانہ تجھے روئے، ارمان سکینہ کا تھا جتنا تجھے روتی، ارمان سکینہ کا تھا جتنا تجھے روتی، سجاد تیری قبر پہ اتنا تجھے روئے، سجاد تیری قبر پہ اتنا تجھے روئے، عباس تیرا حق ہے زمانہ تجھے روئے، ہاشم کے قمر کیوں نہ تیرا چاہنے والا، ہاشم کے قمر کیوں نہ تیرا چاہنے والا، وشمس کا پڑھتے ہوئے سورہ تجھے روئے، وشمس کا پڑھتے ہوئے سورہ تجھے روئے، عباس تیرا حق ہے زمانہ تجھے روئے، حسرت ہے کہ غازی ہو لہو آنکھ سے جاری، حسرت ہے کہ غازی ہو لہو آنکھ سے جاری، یہ میر تکلم کبھی ایسا تجھے روئے، یہ میر تکلم کبھی ایسا تجھے روئے، عباس تیرا حق ہے زمانہ تجھے روئے، عباس تیرا حق ہے زمانہ تجھے روئے، اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجہم۔
عباس ابن ساقی کوثر ہوئے شہید، عباس ابن ساقی کوثر ہوئے شہید، دریا کے کنارے وہ دلاور ہوئے شہید، دریا کے کنارے وہ دلاور ہوئے شہید، عباس نے آقا سے کہا اذن وغا دو، عباس نے آقا سے کہا اذن وغا دو، سب بھائی بھتیجے و برادر ہوئے شہید، عباس ابن ساقی کوثر ہوئے شہید، عباس ابن ساقی کوثر ہوئے شہید، شان کا جاؤ تمہیں اللہ کو سونپا، شان کہا جاؤ تمہیں اللہ کو سونپا، اصغر کو لگا تیر اور اکبر ہوئے شہید، عباس ابن ساقی کوثر ہوئے شہید، عباس ابن ساقی کوثر ہوئے شہید، کس شان و شوکت سے گئے فوج کے اندر، کس شان و شوکت سے گئے فوج کے اندر، ان کافروں کو مار کے آخر ہوئے شہید، عباس ابن ساقی کوثر ہوئے شہید عباس ابن
ساقی کوثر ہوئے شہید
ایک حملے میں عباس نے دریا کو لیا چھین ایک حملے میں عباس نے دریا کو لیا چھین مشکیزہ کو بر کر وہ دلاور ہوئے شہید عباس ابن ساقی کوثر ہوئے شہید عباس ابن ساقی
کوثر ہوئے شہید
عباس نے آقا سے کہا اذن وغا دو عباس نے آقا سے کہا اذن وغا دو سب بھائی بھتیجے و برادر ہوئے شہید
عباس ابن ساقی کوثر ہوئے شہید عباس ابن ساقی کوثر ہوئے شہید
عباس
ابن ساقی کوثر ہوئے شہید
دریا کے کنارے وہ دلاور ہوئے شہید دریا کے کنارے وہ دلاور ہوئے شہید عباس ابن ساقی کوثر ہوئے شہید محمد و آل محمد صلوات